So what I'm going to say about that is most of the time, as you saw in that picture we saw before about I don't need feminism, an anti-feminist is usually truly not anti-feminist at all. Not unless they really believe in women's oppression. Now, if they really believe in women's oppression, I left them a facepalm just for that. They deserve more than that, but I will remain civil. So going on, both relational and individualists wanted the rights of gender, equity, and action through politics and protest. They want the same things. They want to be treated as equal humans. The difference was one side wanted freedom from externally imposed restrictions, so that would be the individualist feminists, and then the other side wanted the freedom to become, and that would be the relational, to become more woman, for instance. And then there's this issue about diversity too. So any questions I can answer for anyone right now? That's a really good question about feminism when it is equality for all. I wonder, I'm going to address that in a little bit because I want to, that's a lot, that goes into a lot of discussion in it, and it's a really interesting discussion. Please don't let me forget that. I think a lot goes into a word defined by authority or dictionaries or by use. That's really true. So let me go on. Oh, yeah, I can read the questions out loud, Catalina. Sure. Okay, so one says here, Dar says, I think it goes a lot if a word is defined by authority of dictionaries or by use. So if by use, in my experience, feminists don't believe in gender equity. And this is true. There's a huge debate on what is authority, especially in this day and age. And then Jordan says, why is it called feminism when it is equality for everyone? Shouldn't it be called something more neutral? And I would say, I can explain that in a little bit. Part of the reason why we call it feminism is because it addresses a certain type of oppression. Not saying that we shouldn't call it other things, but saying that when it's named for who and what it oppresses, it can be addressed in such a way. It tends to be when things are generalized, then some of this kind of gets, I don't know, for lack of a better word, whitewashed. And then, let me see, I'm getting lost in IMs here with the discussion. Are there specific questions to the lecture I can answer right now? And we can kind of talk about the discussions a little bit later so I can get through these slides, or can I go on? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and continue. I do like these discussions in local chat, though. I want to really go into it, but I want to go through this information first. So, Sisterhood of White Women. Prior to the 1980s, feminist scholars were mostly white women who focused on their own oppression, ignoring differences in class, race, age, or sexual preference of other women. I think some of this historically addresses some of the questions that you're also asking and thinking about too in local chat. So why this happened actually is a topic for another controversial lecture, because that is a topic on its own. But the issue behind that is that as individualist feminists, they claimed that renouncing men, family, and typical women's roles were common causes for all women. And this is why they stood, for the most part, alone. Most of society doesn't agree with that. After the 1990s, feminists of color and ethnicity began to critique this solidarity. Their argument is that not every woman faces the same oppression, and for many, simply defining it in those ways is not simple, They can't talk for all women. They have no right to talk for all women. Women have to talk for themselves. And so we revisit this equity versus equality. The sisterhood tried to be equal, but feminists of color said, no, that's not equitable because you can't talk for me. Now, post-structuralists and postmodernist feminists not only look at external forms of oppression, but also internalized forms, all of these leading to social inequities, addressing their own lived social inequities. Unfortunately, by this time, around the 1980s, there was already, because of what this sisterhood did, a huge social backlash, and hence the negative stereotypes of feminists had already been established. So because some people took radical individualist views, you get, and I love this quote, feminism was established so that unattractive women could have easier access to the mainstream of society. And Rush defined this. Rush Limbaugh popularized the term feminazi around the 1990s. So based on what we already know from historical context and things like that, it's really interesting, and I would say we should challenge some of the popular media that decides to define feminism in certain ways. And understand too, with the popular media, they do that because dehumanization is such an easy way to avoid the issue. And I think in some ways, I don't know, to me, sometimes that type of labeling is what it's doing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But historians believed that these uncompromising claims, anti-family, anti-men, were the seed for that popular stereotypical view of the reactionary, angry lesbian feminist. That, and people simply assumed if you were a feminist, that's what you were. And I would say people still assume that. The problem with this, though, is that these extreme reactionary feminists are taken to represent all feminists. And that's not really fair. That's not fair at all. And my explanation for that is, well, take a look at the Christians, right? So if I look at this and I say, oh, look, it's the Ku Klux Klan. They're Christians. Oh my gosh, my neighbors are Christians and I'm Asian. Christians must hate Asians. Dude, I better spray my house with fire protectant, get double locks on my doors, or hell, maybe I should just move to a Buddhist community where I'll be safe from them, from Christians. Feminism becomes a dirty word due to the same exact logic that you see here. You can't and shouldn't pigeontail a group, a small representative group that calls themselves Christians just because of what a small group does. But this illogic is a problem. And part of that problem is because it keeps us from talking about the actual issue, which is equity. And the reason why is because as soon as we say feminism, as soon as we say women's rights, the fact that there's still to this day issues about women being told that they are less. There's no word for it to address that specific type of oppression or that specific type of issue. Because a lot of women are afraid to speak out because they're afraid they're going to be labeled as feminists. So what ends up happening when you popularize a term in a way that creates these negative stereotypes is you silence the issue and it never gets addressed. So, like I said before, I kind of went through some media and I ran across this college student that created this graphic because she was thinking through the ideas and the issues herself. And she initially said, I'm not a feminist, but, and you can read through some of these things, she believes in equity and equality and human rights and that women should be, deserve to be treated like everybody else. So at the end, you can see she says, So maybe I am a feminist. So, any questions so far? Reading those, yeah. I have a long reference list there. Okay, I'm gonna go on. So feminism today is really messy. It blurs the lines between labels and questions of what is authority and truth. Exactly what Dar was saying is what is authority now? Who do we take it from and who do we believe? Unlike the predecessors from the 1980s and the 1990s, modern feminists look at the overlap between race, class, gender, and sexual preference. They critique social constraints through everyday lived experience. So from the late 1990s until now, feminism continues to change and it takes on the flavor of deconstruction and decentering. And what we mean by decentering is that people look beyond just their own situations. And thanks to the internet, that's happened a lot. And they start to listen and understand and hear what other people's experiences are. And at the same time, when they do that, they start to respect and celebrate difference. So I love this term because it was coined in one of my sources, DIY feminism, do-it-yourself feminism. And it's working. We are making progress. So I did a collection of, there's this movement of shirts that you can buy on the internet, and they're called this is what a feminist looks like. And so if you take a look, you can see that feminists are no longer just one sort. It's not the woman with the shotgun anymore, but it's all kinds of people. Yes, you can be a feminist and you can be male. And I thought that was really neat. But some things that I wanted to just capitalize on. Thanks to the internet, people from all genders, races, and classes are given voice when they were originally silenced. People are more aware now of social justice issues than ever before. I found it was really interesting. I don't know if any of you have heard of the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, but it was a really big Twitter movement regarding the kidnapping of the girls in Somalia, a huge global movement, but really, really brings to the forefront, even Michelle Obama did it. It brings to the forefront this issue about gender inequity and feminism and all of these things. And then I have a statistic, and this is for Star, because I do have the asterisk with the quote there for you. But in 2011, 57.3% of all bachelor's degrees were awarded to women. So a larger percentage of bachelor's degrees are now awarded to women than men. However, only 1.5% of those were in engineering. So again, it's just an interesting thing to look at. Feminism is becoming far more complex than it ever was, and I think that's a good thing. But again, and we can talk about Gamergate on the porch. Things like Gamergate still tell us that we have a lot more work to do. So some talks about the future. Today's feminism is about embracing individuality while advocating for equity. And some of the questions that I even pose to everybody here is, where do you stand? What actions can you do? And will you do them? How will you speak up? Because one thing to think about is when you don't speak up in the face of inequity, you're basically taking the side of the person, of the oppressor. You're not saying anything about it, so they're going to keep doing it. So how do you speak up in these situations? How do we talk about these controversial issues?